This video is going to be on the understanding of the structure of some of the elements within the anatomy of type that actually define the character anatomy, or those individual aspects, a bit more than, say, the pieces themselves. So these are just global kind of aspects to understanding how the communication of the anatomy of type starts. And the first line that I'm going to draw is a line that runs along the bottom of the typefaces, and that is the same throughout. In some instances it can drop below, which is actually called the vertex. Anytime a little piece drops below, it's considered the vertex, versus this is considered the descender. So we have to have the baseline to kind of be able to understand those individual characteristics, and that the baseline is where the text actually sits on. And you can see across my different typefaces here, all of them have a baseline. So the baseline's a good indicator of where to get started when dealing with your typography and kind of your identification of your typography. The next line that I'm going to draw is what we classify as the mean line, and I'm going to draw this across, even though the mean line is different for all of these given typefaces. So you can see my A and my N were a different typeface compared to my A, T, O, and my M and my Y. So that is why they all have a different X height, and I did that on purpose to show you that not every typeface has the same X height, and that's okay. But that mean line, which is these three that I just drew, indicates kind of where to think about the X height, and the mean line will allow us to be able to create that visual measurement. In this case, I have those lines kind of indicating that visual, and the X height goes from the mean line to the baseline. But these lines that kind of show the pieces across, I'm going to go ahead and move it in here so you can see that it's for all of these three. That's that mean line is different. So the X height is actually the space that you're going to identify, and I'll go ahead and I'll put in an arrowhead just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. We have a top and bottom arrowhead. That space, and you can see it's different for my other two typefaces, is considered the X height, and the X height is the measurement of the letter form from the baseline to the mean line. And in this instance, over here in my sans serif Helvetica typeface, my X height is a bit more extreme. It's a bit more high. It's pretty common when you're dealing with the sans serifs. They tend to have a bit more, but from the baseline to that mean line is still considered the X height. No matter which typeface that you're looking at, you want to make sure that you understand that that is considered the X height. And I'm going to go ahead and draw in another line here at the top of the A. I'll get it close down. And that is the cap line. And as you might imagine, the cap line is a visual, kind of horizontal, that allows us to understand that there is a measurement from the top to the baseline, and that is going to be called the cap height. And that is kind of how we think about the measurement as well, although in typography it's the X height that actually helps us with the measurements of our typefaces. That's what we look to, is the X height, more so than the cap height. But it's good to know that this is cap line, my apologies, and then this is where the arrow is the cap height. And typography is measured kind of in multiple ways, so you can kind of identify what that means. And I'm going to use my M over here because it's the largest letter form, and I'm going to go from one side of the M to the next. I'm going to use a different color line this time just to help you identify that piece individually. And what I'll do is I'll pull it down into the letter form itself so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. And so I drew this line across here in the hopes that you'll visually see how wide that letter form is in comparison to, say, the O. And the width of our letter forms is just as important as the height of our letter forms, and they help each other in communicating the actual size. And that width is classified as the M space. And when we identify the M space, we understand what will be the measurement, the width of the actual typeface. And it's different again for a variety of our typefaces. I'll make it blue so you can make the connection between the blue and the blue. And the M space is the actual width measurement of a given letter form, and it started, with obviously, figuring out what the measurements are and then determining the largest width. And in this instance, it tends to be the M, tends to be the largest width letter form, although W's can tend to be very wide as well. So it kind of will help you to, when you're looking at typefaces, look to the M first because it is the largest width, and that will determine whether you can actually use a typeface in that given size, given how wide the M is, the letter M is, and that will kind of help you make selections, appropriate selections for what you're trying to achieve. So these are the kind of identifiers that help you then lead to being able to identify the characteristics and the anatomy of the actual letter forms themselves in the given aspects and pieces of the characteristics of each of those.